Hello everyone, Jeremy Gerard from Mythic Customs here with another customizing tutorial video. Today I want to talk about using old ToyBiz Lord of the Rings figures for your Mythic Legions customizing. Now, this is a topic I've talked about many times before. I did a whole show on my Mythic Conversations show about specifically using Lord of the Rings figures. I've done other short videos here about using like skirts from Lord of the Rings figures and feet from Lord of the Rings figures. But even though I've talked about it many times, I've shared information about this, I still get lots of questions from fellow Mythic Legions fans and customizers about using Lord of the Rings figures. Which part should they use? Which figures should they look for? So I figured, this being such a topic that people really are interested in, I would do another short video so it would be easy to find and you'd have all that information in one spot. So when I talk about these old Lord of the Rings figures, once again, I'm talking about the ToyBiz Lord of the Rings line. This is a line that ran for a number of years while the Peter Jackson trilogy was hitting theaters. Great figures, are about 6-inch scale, wonderful fantasy line. I've said before that as great as it is, I could never use that line for like customizing because they always look too much like the characters themselves. When I look at a figure of Legolas, all I see is Orlando Bloom and so forth. One of the things I love about Mythic Legions is the fact that it's not directly tied into an existing property that I'm familiar with. So when I look at these characters, I don't see an actor that portrayed them on film or anything like that. Even though there is a Mythic Legion storyline, you look at these characters, they have that sense of almost white space that you can create your own. And that's really fueled certainly my customizations, and I know a lot of other of my fellow customizers. That's one of the things they love as well. But that Lord of the Rings line, while I don't like using the heads, because, you know, obviously popping a Legolas head on an Elf Ranger body, it still looks like, you know, Orlando Bloom to me. The other parts, the skirts, the capes, the weapons, the feet, these are all parts that I think work wonderfully with Mythic Legion. So let's look at some examples. Now, I shot another one of these short videos a few weeks ago that looked at my 5 favorite non-Mythic Legions fodder figures to use for customizing. And there was actually a Lord of the Rings figure on that list, the Uruk-hai figure of Lurtz. So any of the Uruk-hai figures from Lord of the Rings should give you some parts that you can use for Mythic Legions customizing. Some of them are a little better than others. I really like Lurtz because it has that lower skirt piece you can use. It has some chest armor you can use. He comes with a bow that you can use. He's got some feet that you can use. It's really versatile. So that's this piece here, and this is already broken apart because I've already started using it. But when you find these Uruk-hai figures, the armor that they have on their torsos is like a soft rubbery type armor. Now it is glued in place, but what you'll find is because these figures are so old to begin with, a lot of the quality of them has started to degrade over time. And this is even if you buy them boxed. I've seen boxed versions that when you pull them out, barely touching them, a lot of times they break. It's really depending on how they were stored, how the elements and the temperature fluctuations got at the plastic and how it may have degraded it. So my point is that while back when these were first released, this armor might have been a little more challenging to get off. Now some of that glue is loosened a little bit. It's not terribly difficult. You can pull that armor off. Once you pull that armor off, you're gonna have like a soft rubbery piece that works really well on Mythic Legions. So here's one of my Mythic Legions orc figures, and you can see all that I've done here is I've put this torso armor on top of it. And that's what it looks like. It's just this piece. I did have to, you know, it's glued at the edges here. So when you pull it off, it does break at the edges. But those are going to be under the arms. You're not really going to see it anyway. I'm actually putting it over an Orc Legion Builder body. So it's an armored chest. It works great on the bare chests as well. But it goes on and it adds a little bit of variety to your figures. You can see in this one, I'm also using a loin piece that came from another Lord of the Rings Uruk-hai. Using those loin pieces, that's probably the piece that I use the most. And it's super easy to do. So here's a Faramir figure. And all I do, again, I did a whole other video just about this, is you take one of these figures and all you have to do, you're going to find that a bunch of them, they move at the waist and the torso part and the waist part, especially this rubbery waist armor, they're two separate pieces. So if you break the figure at the waist, and it's very easy to do, again, these are older figures, what you'll find is a lot of these waist pieces, they just have a little bit of hole that went right over a peg or a little, piece here that was on the pelvis area of the Lord of the Rings figure. Well, this works really well with Mythic Legion's construction. Because Mythic Legion's figures have that pelvis with the ball part that the Mythic Legion's folds armor goes right on top of, this will work very, very similar. You can pop this right on, and then you can have some new kind of waist armor, that skirt type folds piece or what have you, for Mythic Legions. So here's an example here. This is a Fury Vampire that I did. And you can see this lower skirt, which really changes the look of that figure. It gives it that kind of like flowing leathery skirt look. That came from a Lord of the Rings figure called a Gondorian Ranger. Now, that piece was blue. The skirt piece was blue. I did paint it here. One thing I will tell you when it comes to painting Lord of the Rings parts is it's kind of hit or miss. These rubbery pieces, sometimes I have found they do take paint okay. This one took it pretty well. Others I have found not take it very well at all. For instance, the Saruman wizard and the Gandalf wizard parts. Trying to paint those robes, I have found that the kind of rubber they're made from, they really don't take paint well. Additionally, when you buy Lord of the Rings figures, when you buy like loose lots, you're going to get a mixed bag in terms of quality. Those two wizard figures I have found to be some of the most problematic. Not only is the white robes of Saruman usually very yellowed and dirty, they also get very, very sticky and tacky. Dust has not been kind to those figures. I tend to not use a lot of those two just because the quality seems so bad, but others work really, really well. This rubbery skirt I found takes paint really, really well. Here's another example here of a female figure, and I turned this one, I did this around the holidays and turned this one actually into my, my Ghost of Christmas Past when I did a couple tribute characters to the Charles Dickens Christmas Carol, the Ghosts of Christmas. And this one uses parts of a Gadriel body. It uses a head from a Thalon Frostbow. But this cape, these lower arm pieces, and certainly this skirt piece, those all came from a Ceremony Eowyn figure. And it creates a really, really cool, different look for your Mythic Legions. So this is an example of using not only a skirt, but also using a cape part. And that's another piece that you can do some really, really cool stuff with when you're combining Lord of the Rings and Mythic Legions. So there's a couple different kinds of capes that Lord of the Rings will come with. Here's one that is fully enclosed. It's a fully separate piece, so you could just slip this right onto a neck post of a Mythic Legions figure, pop the head right on, and you'd have a really cool cape that would hang down. Now, you wouldn't be able to use the shoulder armor, the pauldrons, because it's solid in back, so it's going to cover up those holes. There is a way around it, and sometimes you actually have to work around it. You have to use the pauldrons. This is another cape here that you can see doesn't have an opening for the neck. It's actually got a couple pegs in it. This was made to peg into the back of a Lord of the Rings figure. So if we wanted to use something like this, which is basically what I did here with this warlordy type character, what I've done for those is I hang it off the back and I take an X-Acto knife and I slice a hole, basically like a rectangular opening in the back of the cape. What that does is it allows you to still peg the shoulder armor in. The shoulder armor holds the cape in place and it actually hides the opening itself. So let me take this off and I'll show you what I mean. In this particular case, I kind of sliced it a little bit too far, but even with that, it holds it really, really well. You put that pauldron armor in, and from behind, you can't even tell how badly sliced that cape has been. Let me put this back in, and you'll see what I'm talking about. From the back now, you can't see that really rough slice. It looks really good. It hangs really nicely from the front, and it stays perfectly well. This custom also uses a skirt piece from a Lord of the Rings figure to change up the look there. So those are a couple pieces I love using. Those lower skirt pieces, some of the armor pieces from Uruk-hai's, and certainly the cape pieces are all super, super helpful. Another thing that you can use if you're doing, female figures, like I said, is those skirts. You just saw that I used a skirt on that Ghost of Christmas Past. I've used this skirt before on a Gypsy. That's a great way to change things up. Coats as well. So this is a figure that I did. This is actually my version of Snow White. Kind of a combination of, the classic stories with maybe some of the interpretations that we've seen on, like Once Upon a Time or whatever, where she was an archer. I wanted to do something different and turn her into a bit of a warrior. So I took a Ravina figure, popped a Delphina head on her, real simple customization, but just adding that coat, which is just from a Lord of the Rings figure. I believe this came from a Strider figure. It works really well to start transforming the look of these figures. And you can really get creative with that. You can use them in lots of cool ways. I did a whole Mythic conversation show on this guy here. This is my purple-skinned Jinn. And ultimately, this really just uses a purplore body. I did some modifications. I drilled a hole in the back of the head to use that ponytail, and I drilled some holes in the ears to make earrings. But even without those modifications, really the big parts here is it uses that jackety type piece, that robe type piece in the lower skirt from a Lord Elrond figure. And it also uses some feet, which might be a little tough to see with the robe, but it uses some feet from an Uruk-hai figure. And again, I did a whole show about using non-Mythic Legions feet on Mythic Legions customs. But the Uruk-hai figures in particular, they come with these chunky feet. Some of them have some cool sandals. If you're tired of all of your Mythic Legions having the same heavy armored feet, this is a really cool and actually very inexpensive way that you can swap out some feet on your customs and get some different looks for your display. The last piece I'll show here is my Wendigo. So this is a really crazy looking, creepy character. And this uses a variety of parts. This is actually on a 2.0 skeleton body, and it uses a head that is from the DC Green Lantern line. The character, I forget his name, something like Scalox or something. But I repainted that head. It actually uses some horns from a Xylona figure. But that lower skirt and belt piece here in this fur type covering that he has on his shoulders, those are all from Lord of the Rings figures. The fur piece is from a Grishnak figure, and the lower skirt here is from that aforementioned Lurtz figure. He's also wielding a sword that came with a Lord of the Rings figure, showing that the weapons are also things that you can use. One of the cool things about Lord of the Rings weapons is a lot of them came with sheaths. So that's one of the things we haven't seen a lot of in Mythic Legions yet. We've got a dagger, like that very Arabian Nights looking dagger that comes with a sheath. And we've also got one of the knight swords that comes in a sheath as well. But besides those, everything else has just been loose blades. So if you want to display some of your figures with a weapon that actually, a sword that is inside of a sheath, tapping some Lord of the Rings weapons might be a cool way that you can do that. So ultimately, when you're looking for parts, when you're looking for Lord of the Rings figures to use, definitely the Uruk-hai figures are ones that you're going to get a lot of miles out of. Any of the other figures that have the soft rubbery skirts, those are things that you can absolutely use as well to change the look of your figures. Capes, jackets that you can pull off, those are all very useful. The only Lord of the Rings figures that I personally haven't found a ton of use for are the Hobbits. And you often do, when you buy big lots, there often are a lot of Hobbit figures in there. I've seen some people do some pretty cool stuff with it, even using some of the animal parts like the kitsune heads that I helped design and that Wolf King Customs put out. I've seen people even put those on some of the Hobbit figures and make some cool characters. But ultimately, I personally haven't used the Hobbit figures in a real meaningful way. I mentioned the Gandalf and the Saruman figure, those wizard type figures. I just find the quality of them to be very, very poor when I buy them in lots. So I tend to not use those as well. But if you are going to buy Lord of the Rings figures, I keep saying lots, That's really what I would look for. Look on eBay for large lots of figures. You're gonna probably pay a few $100s to get a big lot, but the per piece price is only gonna be a few dollars. That's probably gonna be a lot more palatable for you than if you're spending $10, $15 per figure just to tear it apart to get like a little lower skirt piece. Remember, when you're buying fodder, it's an investment. It's like any other hobby. If you were a woodworker, you'd be investing in machinery. You'd be investing in wood. These are all pieces that you need to do your craft, to create your art. Customizing action figures is the same. You're investing in paints, you're investing in brushes, absolutely. But investing in fodder pieces to use for your figures, that's part of it as well. So don't shy away from dropping a few $100s on a big lot of Lord of the Rings figures, especially if you're looking at a lot that's 40, 50, 60 pieces. You're gonna pay a little bit for that, but you're probably gonna have a lot of really cool fodder to work with. Hopefully this helps. If you enjoy videos like this, let me know in the comments. Give the video a like, and certainly if you're not already subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so you'll be notified when videos like this go live. Until next time, thank you very much. I can't wait to see what you make.